Originally, when I joined the band, it was a five-piece band. Everybody was part of this corporation called Eagles Limited. We all owned Eagles.
And that helped to hasten our demise. It interfered with our ability to get along with one another. Tempers, insecurities were.
Limited, we shared equally but when we got back together, Don and Glenn felt that they should get a much larger share.
What if I told you that the man who created the most famous guitar solo in rock history was kicked out of his own band through a cold, heartless fax? What if the song that made millions of people fall in love with classic rock was written by someone who was later treated like he never existed? Today, we're diving deep into the shocking, true story of Don Felder, the forgotten genius behind the Eagles' biggest hits, and why it took him until age 77 to finally tell the world what really happened behind closed doors. Picture this. It's 2001, and Don Felder, one of the most talented guitarists in rock history, is sitting in his home when a fax machine starts buzzing. He walks over, expecting maybe some tour details or band business. Instead, he finds a cold corporate message that would change his life forever. You're fired. No phone call from his bandmates. No face-to-face meeting, just a piece of paper that ended decades of his life's work. But this story doesn't start there. It goes back much further, to a time when a young guitarist from Florida would help create some of the most beautiful music ever recorded. Don Felder joined the Eagles in 1974, and from day one, he knew he was something special. While the other guys in the band were focused on country rock and mellow California sounds, Felder brought something completely different. He brought fire. He brought power. He brought the kind of guitar playing that could make your heart race and your soul soar. When he plugged in his guitar, the Eagles weren't just another country rock band anymore. They became rock legends. The magic really happened in 1976 when Felder was sitting alone in his Malibu home with his 12-string guitar. He started playing around with some chords, creating a melody that felt haunting and beautiful at the same time. He had no idea that what he was creating in that quiet moment would become one of the most famous songs in the world. That simple melody he recorded on his little demo tape would become Hotel California. Yes, that Hotel California. The song that everyone knows, the song that defines classic rock, the song with the guitar solo that gives people chills every single time they hear it. Felder took that demo to his bandmates, Don Henley and Glenn Frey, thinking they were all equal partners in this creative process. He thought they would all work together to turn his musical idea into something amazing. And they did create something amazing. But what Felder didn't realize was that in the Eagles, some members were more equal than others. While his guitar work became the heart and soul of their biggest hit, the credit and the money would flow in a very different direction. You see, behind all the harmony and beautiful music, the Eagles were running like a business. And in this business, Don Henley and Glenn Frey were the bosses, while everyone else was just an employee. They made all the decisions about money, about tours, about which songs would be recorded, and about how much each member would get paid. Even though Felder was creating the music that made them millions of dollars, he was getting treated like a hired hand instead of a true partner. For years, Felder tried to be the good guy. He tried to go along with the program. He kept his mouth shut when decisions were made without him. He smiled for the cameras and played his heart out on stage, even when he felt like his creative input was being ignored. But inside, the frustration was growing. He would sit in band meetings where his ideas were dismissed. He would watch as Henley and Frey got the biggest share of the money, even when the songs were built on his musical foundations. He was like a chef who created a world-famous recipe, only to watch other people take credit and profit while he got paid like a cook. The really painful part was that Felder wasn't asking for special treatment. He just wanted fairness. He wanted to be treated like an equal member of the band he was helping to make famous. When he would bring up questions about money or creative control, he wasn't trying to cause trouble. He was just trying to understand why he was being treated differently than his bandmates. But instead of getting answers, he got labeled as difficult to work with. Think about how that must have felt. You're pouring your heart and soul into creating music that touches millions of people around the world. You're the guy playing the guitar solos that make people cry and sing along. But when it comes time to make important decisions about the band, you're told to sit down and be quiet. That's exactly what happened to Don Felder for more than 2 decades. Things got even worse when the Eagles reunited in 1994 for their Hell Freezes Over tour. Felder thought maybe this fresh start would mean a more equal partnership. Maybe after years apart, they could come back together as true friends and collaborators. But nothing had changed. If anything, the divide had gotten wider. Henley and Frey had gotten used to being in complete control, and they saw no reason to change. The way things worked, during those reunion years, Felder was still performing the songs that he had helped create, including that iconic Hotel California solo that audiences demanded every single night. But behind the scenes, he was still being excluded from financial decisions and creative choices. It was like being invited to dinner, but not being allowed to sit at the table. He was good enough to make the money on stage, but not good enough to have a real voice in how the band operated. The breaking point came in 2001. After decades of feeling like an outsider in his own band, Felder finally decided he had enough. He started asking the hard questions more directly. Why was he getting a smaller share of the profits when his contributions were so important to their success? Why weren't his creative ideas given the same respect as Henley and Frey's? These weren't unreasonable questions, but they were seen as threats to the power structure that had been in place for so long. That quote S when that cold fax arrived. No discussion, no attempt to work things out, just a corporate-style firing that treated him like an employee who could be replaced. After helping to create some of the most beloved music in rock history, Don Felder was dismissed like he was nothing more than a troublemaker who had overstayed his welcome. But Felder wasn't going to go quietly into the night. He knew that what had happened to him was wrong, not just morally, but legally. So he did what anyone would do when they've been treated unfairly by their business partners. He sued. He filed a lawsuit against Henley and Frey, claiming they had breached their partnership agreement and wrongfully removed him from the band. More importantly, he was fighting for recognition of his contributions to the Eagles' legacy. The lawsuit became big news in the music world. Suddenly, fans were learning about the dark side of their favorite band. They were hearing about power struggles, unfair treatment, and corporate-style decision-making in a group they thought was all about artistic collaboration. The image of the harmonious Eagles was being shattered, and people were shocked to learn how ugly things had gotten behind the scenes. After years of legal battles, the case was settled out of court in 2007. The amount of money involved was kept secret, but for Felder, this was never really about the money. It was about respect. It was about recognition. It was about making sure that history would remember his contributions to one of the most successful bands in rock history. But the real bombshell came in 2008 when Felder published his tell-all book, Heaven and Hell, My Life in the Eagles. This wasn't just another celebrity memoir full of funny stories and name-dropping. This was a detailed, unflinching look at how the Eagles really operated when the cameras weren't rolling. Felder didn't hold back. He wrote about the manipulation, the unfair treatment, and the way creative partnerships can turn into corporate power plays. In the book, Felder painted a picture of a band where talent and hard work weren't enough to guarantee fair treatment. He described meetings where his voice was ignored, tours where he felt like an employee rather than a partner, and a system where two people held all the power while everyone else was expected to just go along with their decisions. It was like getting a peek behind the curtain of the music industry, and what people saw wasn't always pretty. The book created a huge controversy. Some fans felt like Felder was just bitter about being fired and was trying to damage the Eagles' reputation. Others felt like he was finally telling the truth about how the music bus INS really works, especially when massive egos and huge amounts of money are involved. Don Henley and the remaining Eagles members were furious. They claimed Felder was violating confidentiality agreements and tried to stop certain parts of the book from being published. But here's what made Felder's story so powerful. He wasn't just pointing fingers at other people. In his book, he was honest about his own mistakes too. He admitted that he had been difficult at times, that he had lost his temper, and that he had sometimes handled situations poorly. This honesty made his story more believable because he wasn't trying to make himself look perfect. He was just trying to tell the truth about what had happened. What quote is really remarkable is how Felder handled his life after being kicked out of the Eagles. A lot of people in his situation might have become bitter and angry, spending their time complaining about how unfairly they were treated. But Felder chose a different path. He decided to focus on moving forward instead of looking backward. In 2012, he released his first solo album, Road to Forever. This wasn't an attempt to recreate the Eagles' sound or to prove he could be more successful on his own. It was simply Felder's way of showing that he still had music in him. The songs were personal and honest, dealing with themes of loss, betrayal, and the process of starting over. It was like he was using music to heal from the wounds of his past. Then, In 2019, he released American Rock and Roll, an album that featured collaborations with some of the biggest names in rock music, including Slash, Sammy Hagar, and Mick Fleetwood. This wasn't just impressive because of the famous guest musicians. It was impressive because it showed that Felder's fellow musicians still respected him and wanted to work with him. In an industry where reputation means everything, the fact that these rock legends were willing to collaborate with him spoke volumes about his character and talent. Throughout this period, Felder maintained a steady touring schedule. He wasn't playing in massive arenas anymore, but he was still connecting with audiences in theaters and festivals across the country. And here's the beautiful part. He always included Hotel California in his shows. He could have been bitter about playing the song that had caused him so much trouble. Instead, he played it with the same passion and skill that had made it famous in the first place. He understood that the song belonged to the fans as much as it belonged to him. In 2025, at age 77, Felder released another album called The Vault, 50 Years of Music. This project was like opening a musical time capsule. It included unreleased demos and recordings that spanned his entire career, giving fans a chance to hear the creative process behind his music. It was his way of showing that his musical legacy extended far beyond his time with the Eagles. But the most important thing about Felder's recent years isn't his albums or his tours. It's the way he's chosen to talk about his past. In recent interviews, he doesn't sound angry or bitter anymore. He sounds like someone who has made peace with what happened to him. He said that being fired from the Eagles might have actually been a blessing because it freed him from a situation where he wasn't being treated fairly. This doesn't mean he's forgotten what happened or that he thinks it was right, but it means he's chosen not to let those negative experiences define the rest of his life. He's found a way to forgive without forgetting, to move forward without pretending the past didn't happen. That takes incredible strength and maturity. When Felder talks about his relationship with his former bandmates now, he's surprisingly measured. He attended Glenn Frey's funeral in 2016, showing respect for his former collaborator despite their difficult history. When asked about Don Henley, he doesn't attack or criticize. He simply acknowledges that they see things differently and that some relationships can't be repaired, and that's okay. What makes Felder's story so powerful isn't just what happened to him, it's how he responded to what happened to him. He could have spent the last 20 years consumed by anger and resentment. Instead, he chose to channel his energy into creating new music, teaching young musicians, and building a life that wasn't defined by his past conflicts. Today, when Don Felder talks about Hotel California, he doesn't sound like someone who's bitter about not getting enough credit. He sounds like someone who's proud of creating something beautiful that has touched millions of lives. He knows that no matter what happened with the business side of the Eagles, he was part of creating something special that will outlive all of the drama and conflict. His story is important because, it shows us something real about the music industry and about human nature. It shows us that even in the world of rock and roll, which we like to think is all about artistic freedom and rebellion, there can be, corporate-style power plays and unfair treatment. But it also shows us that talent and integrity can survive even when they're not properly recognized or rewarded. For young musicians, Felder's story is both a warning and an inspiration. It's a warning about the importance of understanding the business side of music and making sure you're protected in any partnership, but it's also an inspiration about the importance of staying true to your artistic vision, even when other people try to control or diminish your contributions. At 77 years old, Don Felder doesn't need the Eagles anymore. He's proven that he can create meaningful music and connect with audiences on his own terms. He's shown that his talent was never dependent on being part of any particular group. Most importantly, he's demonstrated that it's possible to survive betrayal and unfair treatment without becoming bitter or defeated. The next time you hear that incredible guitar solo on Hotel California, remember the man who created it. Remember that it came from someone sitting alone in his house, playing his heart out on a 12-string guitar with no idea that he was creating a piece of music history. Remember that the person who gave the world that beautiful moment was late, are treated like he didn't matter. But also remember that Don Felder didn't let that treatment break him. He kept playing, kept creating, and kept sharing his gift with the world. He found a way to forgive without forgetting, to move forward without giving up his dignity. That might be the most beautiful thing about his story, not the fame or the hit songs or even the eventual vindication, but the simple human courage to keep going when things get difficult. Don Felder's story reminds us that real success isn't just about money or fame or recognition. It's about staying true to yourself and your values, even when other people try to diminish or control you. It's about finding the strength to keep creating, even when your contributions aren't properly appreciated. And it's about understanding that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply refuse to be silenced. So there you have it, the untold story of Don Felder and the dark side of the Eagles. It's a story about talent and betrayal, about friendship and greed, about the price of speaking truth to power. But most of all, it's a story about the resilience of the human spirit and the power of music to heal and inspire. If this story opened your eyes to a different side of rock history that you never knew existed, please hit that like button to show your support. Share this video with other music lovers who might be interested in learning the real story behind the songs they love. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel so you never miss our deep dives into the fascinating stories behind your favorite artists. There are so many more untold stories in music history, and we're here to bring them to light, one video at a time. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.